Hello there. Welcome to another episode of First Catch, where today we're going to be looking at the opening of the salmon fishing season on the River Erne. We're going to Howitown Hatchery to see how that operates, and we're also having a chat with one of the gillies on the River Erne.
Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for turning out to Chief Iron Club's 2015 River Erne opening ceremony. We're sponsored today by the famous Grouse Whisky. I'll proceed now with customary christening the river. Then I'll proceed now with the first cast. And all that's left is, I wish you all a very successful 2015 and tight lines to you all. Thanks very much, gentlemen.
Well, here we are at Howitown Hatchery, and to give us the grand tour and explain how everything works, here he is, the brown trout manager, Ian Semple.
Good, Paul.
Nice to see you, Ian.
See you too.
Now, the first question that springs to mind is, this has been going for a long time, but when did it actually open for business?
1881 was when Howitown was established, and at that time 20 million eggs were incubated each winter.
That's some number of fish, isn't it?
It is. We produce salmon and brown trout. The salmon are for commercial purposes for the table market, and the brown trout are for sport fishing. The bulk of the income is derived from the sale of 2-year-old fish, but we don't start off with fish at 2 years of age. We obviously start off with eggs. Initially, when eggs come in, we would do a volume count, and we'd put a litre of eggs into each basket. We would take a subsample of 50 millilitres of eggs, count them by hand to get an estimate of the volume count, and then we would lay those down in incubating baskets. As a rough rule of thumb, we'd put a litre of eggs into each basket, and that would equate, in the case of salmon eggs, to about 5,000 eggs. Later on, we can, once the eggs have actually eyed up, and by that I mean that we can actually see the eye of the alevin through the shell of the egg, we use something that would look very much similar to a children's toy. So we put the eggs into a basin with water, we dip this in, give it a shuggle, and every single one of these dimples would be filled with an egg, and that plate takes 500 eggs. So you then decant that into another basin, and that means that we can count the eggs very, very accurately when we set up the populations to take them forward in these small tanks behind me, through first feeding and on growing.
So one time I used to catch a fish and then I would cut them up and give them to all my neighbours, but not now. They're a protected species now, as you can understand.
The fish are declining just now, but they may come back. We're hoping they will.
The last 5 years they've gone down and down, that's for sure. Last year we got 77 salmon on this river, and that was only half the previous year, which was it was 141.
At one time we had a very bad ulcerative dermal necrosis, UDN in the river. It was a white fungus that covered the entire fish, made them look like ghosts. And every time you found one of these, you had to bury it to stop the spread of this disease. That was more or less the end of the salmon fishing in this river.
I think the problem stems more at sea than on the rivers. I think a lot is to do with it could be the nets. I think the seal population now is on the increase, which certainly doesn't help the actual hern, which is the salmon's food. they're getting pushed further and further out into the Atlantic, which means the salmon have to go further to find that, and that's possibly what's making the seasons longer. The fish are later in coming up because they have to go further afield for their food.
Every morning, what we've got to do is we've got to inspect all of these incubating eggs. Now these are all at the eyed stage, and any eggs that are there that are discoloured and that have gone pale, like this one, we would pick out. And that egg has actually stopped developing. So you can see that there's a white marble defect in that egg, which is the salt balance changing. So that's effectively a dead egg. So we take that out because we don't want that acting as a reservoir of infection and damaging the good eggs adjacent to it. The contrast to that would be an egg like this, that you can actually see the eye of the alevin through the shell of the egg. And you can see the oil droplet there as well, and the orange of the yolk sac. And that's a perfectly viable egg that's developing. Pick these out. There's an egg there that's quite white and looks quite opaque. Another one on the left, you can actually see the eyes of the developing alevin through the shell of the egg. So the one on the right that's fairly white is dead, and the one that's to the left is actually still developing and is okay, it's still viable. These are now at the alevin stage. These have been hatched, and they've been hatched off for maybe 2 weeks. So the yolk sac is starting to be absorbed. If we look at the alevin, that's a perfectly formed alevin. And you see it doesn't really look like a fish just now, it's quite flat. The head's very, very pronounced, and the eyes are very pronounced. And you see the oil droplet in the yolk sac there, which acts as a food reserve. It's still developing its fins. It won't be fully formed until that yolk sac is almost completely absorbed.
I'm fishery manager, but one of the roles in that is that I do bailiffing throughout the system. Fishery manager, first of all, looks after, there's a stretch of water, I look after that, and I try and encourage people to come up to fish for salmon and sea trout. Particularly when there's a lot of fish here, you've got to look about in case there's people trying to exploit these, going in with big hooks, nets. There's areas in the Tay system where there's a concentration of fish, so those areas are kept a close eye on from bailiffs. We've got a hatchery there, it's 3 million eggs capacity for it, and it's for salmon, spring salmon in particular. We catch the salmon in November time, strip the eggs from them, and then we put them back out around about April time. And once you've taken the eggs from them, in the wild, normally 95% of them will die, depending on the systems. A few do make it back to the sea, but in general most of them die. So when we recondition them, we are actually force feeding them, and they start to feed in fresh water, and we keep them, and the following year we'll take eggs off them again, the same fish. That would still be classed as a wild salmon.
We're now down at the trout ponds. Now this is a traditional earth pond site. This site goes back to 1881, and the whole site here took 10 years to complete, all dug by hand. So these ponds contain fish up to a year of age. We net these fish out and move them down to the big ponds once we've sold the 2-year-old fish, and that leaves this space ready for the fry coming down from the hatchery. We're just about to go through some late season broodfish. The ice was covering the pond this morning, so we had to cut the ice round the edge and then pull the seine net underneath the ice. So it's not always plain sailing, but luckily the air temperature's above freezing. It's nice and sunny. The water's very, very cold. It's only 1 degree Celsius, so I'm going to get pretty cold handling the fish, but it's going to be okay to handle the fish today, and we'll see if we can get any more fish to strip. Now these are in anaesthetic. It's MS222, so they'll take a moment or two to subdue, then I'll be able to handle the fish quite easily without too much stress. We'll be able to see the characteristic spawning colours and the fairly bold spots that are quite typical of the Howieton strain of brown trout. Right, we have a pretty typical male fish here. The characteristics to look for are the kype on the lower jaw, that little hook, white leading edge on the anal fin. The adipose fin is much bigger than an equivalent sized female, so I put that one there. Here's a female that's actually slightly longer, but you see that her adipose fin is smaller. Here's the male, and this one's also much brighter coloured, a lot more red in it. To get milt off the male fish, all we do is gentle pressure between the pelvic fin and the anal fin, and that will expel any milt that's in the sperm ducts ready to be ejaculated. So here's a female that has ovulated. If I hold the fish up like that, you see how slack she is towards the vent, but the egg mass is all loose inside the body cavity and will fall forward, and I can palpate that egg mass quite easily. To expel the eggs, all I do is arch her back and gentle pressure between the rib cage, and I can expel eggs. Now if I want to use these eggs, we need to strip them dry, because when they get into water they'll start to absorb water. So we'll make sure that basin's completely dry. Right, here's another female to be stripped into the basin. So I've wiped moisture off the fish, and we'll now just expel these eggs. And it's not intense pressure, it's just gentle pressure. The fish is ready to spawn anyway, so the eggs will come out easily. And if the eggs don't come out easily with gentle pressure, she's not ready. Put her back in the pond and investigate the fish again, maybe a week or 10 days time. Right, we're now going to fertilise these eggs. So what I'm looking for is a male fish with nice bright colours, nice spot pattern, and then just gentle pressure and I'll be able to get some milt onto these eggs. Having got the milt in there, the thing to bear in mind, as soon as it hits ovarian fluid, it's activated, so we need to mix that quickly, because there's only 30 seconds of motility for the individual sperms to be able to penetrate the egg and fertilise them. But if we mix that like that, we get basically 100% fertilisation.
Is it?
Yeah, I think so.
Brown trout. Brown.
Not a salmon.
Oh, it's a sea trout.
How does it feel to catch the first fish of the day?
Look at the line. Aye, some mess.
Well, thank you for watching, and I hope you'll tune in same time next week for another exciting edition of First Catch. It's no joke.